Alright, Shalom, giving all praises, honor, and glory to our power, Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shah, Bahasham Rachak Wadash, double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the hopeful elect of the tabernacles of David, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, wherever we may be, and wherever you may be. To us, say Shalom, and Shalom. Alright, it's going to be super brief, because I was just looking at some little news clips here and there. And the last one I looked at was something from this dude, Dabu 7. Pretty much this quick response force. Okay. And so I went to go and Google it up, see what I can see about it. And it says here, which up right there, what is called National Guard Response Force. All right, but it's supposed to be a quick response force, which is why you'll see QRF there. So following his inauguration in January 2025, Donald Trump established a National Guard Quick Reaction Force to address civil unrest in U.S. cities. All right, this initiative has sparked significant legal and political controversy regarding the limits of presidential power to deploy military troops for domestic law enforcement. Details of the Quick Reaction Force. So, formation on August 25th, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order establishing a standing National Guard Quick Reaction Force, or QRF for short, right? Rapid nationwide deployment. Okay, and so when I came and looked this up, only thing I could think of is what, like martial law. Is that what they're preparing for? Is that what they're building up to? Because I mean, you see the civil unrest slowly, blossoming over. You see he's waiting for the moment to really push that insurrection act so he can, so-called legally make use of the troops. And I mean, and the only way he can do that is if there's a so-called an uprising or an insurrection, okay? Which allows them to go and take that pathway and be justified by it. And I mean, as a matter of fact, they'll do that. I'll type that in as we finish this. So it says the force is intended to assist federal, state, and local law enforcement in quelling civil disturbances, sort of like what you see happening now. People rioting, people protesting, people that are against ICE and things of that nature, going to this city, that city. All right. So civil disturbances. All right. Proposed size and location. A Pentagon blueprint for the QRF indicated. All right. Once again, quick response force. The QRF indicated a force of 600 soldiers split into two 300-member units to cover areas east and west of the Mississippi River. These units were to be stationed at military bases in Alabama and Arizona. All right, and if you see the Mississippi River, I don't want to say it's exactly centered. It's definitely not exactly centered, but I mean you get the point. East and west of the Mississippi River. Okay, which is interesting. Not saying it's the same thing, but it's interesting how because America is known as spiritual Sodom and Egypt. Okay, so in ancient Egypt, their big source was the Nile River, all right, which I believe that was part of one of their gods, all right, because they had a god for every daggone thing. Man, the Nile River was probably one of the extremely most important, top priority, things to them. The Nile River was very important, okay, and similar to that here, you have the Mississippi. Legal and political challenges. The creation and the use of the QRF has raised legal and constitutional questions, primarily because the National Guard is typically under the control of a state's governor until federalized, okay, in which they can be activated by the state. But if it's like a fight for troops, really, because if the state doesn't punch in the number first before the country, government, whatever, how you want to call it, the federal government, then the federal government can take use of it. But if the state activates, then it's like a fight for troops, okay? But it says the National Guard is typically under the control of a state's governor until federalized. All right. So when they become federalized, I mean, it is what it is. It's what it just said there. All right. well, I mean, I guess you could say national government, but yeah, the federal government, all right, is now moving these National Guard troops to wherever they would like. Okay. Federalization without state consent. In June 2025, Trump federalized 4,000 members of California's National Guard without the state's consent, marking the first time in U.S. history this action was taken under these circumstances. Ongoing lawsuits. I don't really care about that. I saw some other stuff here. Um, yeah, you could probably read this section if you like. I don't want to keep going right here. So it says reliance on federal statutes. The Trump administration has primarily relied on Title 10 of the U.S. Code, which allows the president to take. The Trump administration has primarily relied on Title 10 of the U.S. Code, which allows the president to take command of National Guard units in response to rebellion. See, and what's going on right now? ICE raids, protests. Okay, other uprising protests about different things. Okay, but one of the main things you hear about is ICE, but people are also unhappy with with the course of action the president they voted for took, or with the current like living situation, money, food, which has been a major one as of late. The SNAP benefits, different things of that nature. So uh, which allows the president to take command of National Guard units in response to rebellion, or if federal laws cannot be executed with regular forces. Okay. Threat to use the Insurrection Act, which that's been a big talk as of late. The it's basically the loophole to the Posse Comitatus Act. Okay, as long as there's an insurrection, or as we just said here, a rebellion, okay, they can move forward with it. And they're taking these ICE protests and other types of protests, and they're getting violent. But they really wanted to get, like, I'm pretty sure they wanted to get to the point where there's actually, situations happen, not just, violent protest and arrest or a little scruffle, things to actually get bloody, maybe people to beat ICE or some troops or whatever on the ground with their own weapons, which really will, sort of, respond as a civil unrest. Okay, and they could say that that's an insurrection, right? This violates, your right to protest, and you've taken it too far. All right, now we're gonna invoke the Insurrection Act, and now he can just make the troops boogie, and he's so-called justified by it. So, threat to use the Insurrection Act. Trump has repeatedly threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, which would provide him with additional legal authority to deploy the military for law enforcement. And that's the key thing. That's right. This one is a major one here, because this is the key thing that they want to move up to. Context of deployment. The Trump administration has largely deployed federalized National Guard troops to Democratic-led cities, claiming a need to address crime or quell civil unrest. These actions have been met with strong opposition from local and state leaders who question the motives and legality of the deployments. San Francisco Deployment Council. Okay, Washington, D.C. deployment. You read all that. I mean, it's the end of it. In October 2025, President Trump canceled a planned deployment of federal agents to San Francisco following conversations with the city's mayor and Silicon Valley leaders. I forgot all about Silicon Valley. Federalized troops were sent to the nation's capital, where they have been tasked with duties such as park cleanup, in addition to that's funny, to their presence for civil disturbances. All right. And we just mentioned that the Posse Comitatus Act. So you can read into these things if you like. Let me type in a random question. What would yeah, let's do that. Constitute. Let's say martial law. Now I'm not saying that they were doing this for martial law. But that's just a random thought that popped in my head. Like, what are they gearing up for? Martial law? Okay, because I mean, what is the next level? Civil unrest, Insurrection Act, martial law. So, in the United States, martial law is a last resort measure under which civilian government is temporarily replaced by military authority. It is only considered in cases of actual necessity where civilian authorities are unable to maintain order or ensure public safety. The U.S. Constitution does not explicitly define martial law or grant the president the authority to declare it. However, the power to impose martial law can be inferred from the federal government's duty to maintain public order. States' constitutions, in contrast, often include provisions that specifically allow governors to impose martial law. Right, and as you notice, our governors pop up again. Circumstances for declaring martial law. While there is no established legal definition, martial law has been historically imposed during extreme situations in which civilian government has collapsed. Oh, it says in which civilian government has collapsed, including war or invasion. Okay, the most notable federal level declaration occurred in Hawaii after 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor, lasting nearly 3 years. There you go again. See, same thing: insurrection or rebellion. Okay, so that's what they want. They want the people to rise up and start the fight back against ICE and troops and whatever else, all right, that might be thrown their way. All right, so they can actually push this forward and say that, hey, it's legal because you guys rose up and fought back against the federal law or whatever, troops, however they're gonna put it. Historically, martial law has been used to suppress domestic uprisings. For example, President Abraham Lincoln implemented it in certain areas during the Civil War. See, there you go. Abraham Lincoln during that Civil War, but there's about to be a modern day Civil War, and this is all scriptural, right? Sedition among men and things of that nature, invading one another, they should not regard their kings or princes in the course of their actions outstanding their power. Second Edges, what, 15, I believe. Then it says massive civil unrest, widespread rioting, and violent protests that overwhelm civilian law enforcement can trigger a declaration. This has happened in many cities throughout the U.S. history, often at the state level. Major natural disasters and cases where catastrophic events cause a complete breakdown of civilian governance, such as this 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Martial law has been imposed, which I mean, he's all got his heart technology and stuff like that, but that's probably not going to be a case here. Um, just noting that what happens under martial law. When it's declared the military takes control of governance and can suspend certain civil liberties, the specific actions taken can vary, but generally include suspension of civil liberties, freedoms like freedoms like speech. They're attacking that right now. Always behind the scene, but sometimes they come out with a little couple things here and there. Okay, freedoms like speech, movement. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able, and assembly can be restricted. Okay, yeah, you getting out there together to go and protest or whatever, that's gonna be shut down, or you're gonna face the consequences. Look, there you go, curfews. We mentioned that under martial law. That's what happened with the C-19er. The military can impose curfews to limit movement during certain hours. See, suspension of habeas corpus, the right of a person under arrest to be brought before a court can be suspended in a case of rebellion or invasion. Wow, the right of a person under arrest to be brought before a court can be suspended in cases of rebellion or invasion. Okay, so they're almost treating you like like a public enemy number one type deal. That going silence of the lamb. Military tribunals for civilians. Okay, in cases where civilians, not it's funny how they have a tribunal, right? Anyways, in cases where civilian courts are not operating, civilians can be subject to trial by military tribunal. However, the Supreme Court has ruled that military trials of civilians are invalid if civilian courts are functional. Limitations on martial law. Even under martial law, the U.S. Constitution still applies. And actions taken by military authorities are subject to judicial review. A declaration of martial law is distinct from the Insurrection Act, which allows the president to deploy the military to support civilian law enforcement. The Insurrection Act does not replace civilian government with military rule, a key difference from martial law. So it says the Insurrection Act does not replace civilian government with military rule, but that's the next level. All right, the Insurrection Act is revoked or pushed forward. They send out the troops where they want to, and then the next level to that is that the troops are already there, so all they gotta do is just take over, which is the martial law. Okay, so I want to real quick, where was it before we close it out? let's see. What means tribunal? A body established with the authority to hear and settle legal claims, disputes, or administrative matters. The term is broader than the standard court and can refer to a wide variety of educative forums, including specialized administrative agencies, military courts, and international judicial bodies. Specialized purpose. Unlike general courts that handle a wide range of civil and criminal cases, a tribunal is often created for a specific area of law or type of dispute. Examples include tax tribunals, immigration tribunals, ringing the bell, or labor tribunals. Simplified procedure. Tribunals tend to be less formal and less bound by rigid rules of evidence and procedure than traditional courts. The goal is often to provide a quicker and less expensive way to resolve issues. Unique composition, binding decisions, statutory tribunals, administrative tribunals. I was gonna pop that up. I was gonna good, so it's already here. I was gonna type in military tribunals. I was just trying to get a little bit out of here, but here it is right here, anyways. So these courts are set up by military authorities to try individuals for offenses against military law or wartime. Oh, wait a minute, see, because if the troops are put into play, so-called legally, okay, then that means you now people are creating offenses against military law or wartime conduct, which they already deemed you as the enemy, right? The enemy within. Okay. Military commissions, distinct from the more common court-martial, military tribunals can operate outside of civilian law to try enemy combatants, as was the case for detainees at Guantanamo Bay. See, so they can get real intricate with their laws, man. Okay, their little unrighteous decrees, right? Limitations on civilian jurisdictions. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that military courts, including tribunals, generally do not have the authority to try civilians if civilian courts are functioning. All right, and so you can read more into this if you like yourself. I just want to get a little bit of that in there, and I will that'll probably be it. You can link to other things, if you like. So yeah, just going back up here to the top. All right, Trump's National Guard Response Force is quick reaction force. All right, so we'll leave it at that. Shalom.